You keep waiting for the test to end, but what if it already did? Chosen one. There is a reason that question feels almost uncomfortable. You know what it means to survive something you were certain would change you forever. You know what it means to keep functioning when nobody around you understood how much effort ordinary things required. You prayed without immediate evidence. You carried responsibility while exhausted. You made choices you could still respect when easier choices were available. And maybe that is why the strangest part came afterward, because you expected relief, but part of you stayed on guard. You expected clarity. Your mind kept replaying old possibilities. You expected to feel victorious. Instead, you started wondering whether the absence of a visible reward meant you had somehow failed. That question opens everything we need to see. Passing a test and realizing that the test is over are not always the same event. One can happen in your life, while the other has not yet happened inside you. Before this message ends, you will understand three things. First, why strong people remain internally braced after the pressure changes. Second, why faithfulness can quietly become a need to prove how much you can endure. Third, why your next season may require a different kind of clarity, not a greater capacity for pain. The third revelation changes the whole message. But I want to give you something useful now. Think about what happens when something good enters your life. A person treats you well. A door opens. An unexpected moment of peace appears. Does your body soften, or does your mind immediately search for the hidden cost? That tiny reaction matters. You may have called it discernment. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is protection. Learned yesterday, continuing to work after danger today has passed. The test trained you to detect what might hurt you, but it did not automatically teach you how to live when everything in front of you is no longer a threat. Notice how ordinary this can look. You wake up and check for bad news before you check how you feel. You receive a kind message and wonder what the person really wants. You get one quiet afternoon, yet your mind invents 3 problems to solve. You call it being responsible. Your nervous system may call it staying ready. That is the first clue. The hardest season did not only change what you believed, it changed what you expected. It taught part of you that peace can disappear without warning, so you learned to stay prepared. That preparation helped you survive. It does not have to become your permanent way of living. If this names something you have felt, mark this moment with one simple declaration. The test is over. Not because every difficulty has vanished, not because life will never ask courage from you again, but because you are refusing to give the battle of yesterday authority over the decisions of today. Hold that thought closely. In a moment, I will show you the first sign that someone has survived the outer test, but is still unknowingly living inside it. It is so ordinary that many strong people mistake it for wisdom. Once you see it, you will start recognizing it everywhere. The first sign is simple. Your circumstances become safer, but your inner world keeps preparing for impact. You may finally have room to rest, yet rest makes you uneasy. You may receive good news, then immediately search for what could go wrong. You may call this wisdom because it feels responsible. Chosen one. This is where many people blame themselves. They say they should trust God more. They assume their tiredness means their faith is weak. They wonder why peace feels difficult after praying for peace for so long. But exhaustion after endurance is not proof that endurance failed. Sometimes it is proof that endurance became a habit. Think about what long pressure teaches a person. You learn to scan the room. You learn to read the smallest change in another voice. You keep another plan ready, because disappointment once arrived without warning. Those responses made sense when the season demanded them. The problem begins when an adaptation from yesterday becomes an identity today. I call this the after-test lag. The outer situation changes first. Your inner expectations change later. One part of you knows the storm has passed. while another part still listens for thunder because listening once helped you stay prepared. This is why peace can feel strangely vulnerable. Conflict gave you something to respond to. Waiting gave you something to manage. Pressure gave your mind a clear assignment. Then quiet arrives, and quiet gives you no enemy to organize around. For someone trained by hardship, that absence can feel less like freedom and more like exposure. There is an old pattern in the story of Elijah that makes this deeply human. After a moment of extraordinary courage, he did not simply move into endless strength. He became afraid. He became exhausted. He needed rest and care. Strength and depletion can exist in the same person. You can love God and still be tired. You can have courage and still need recovery. You can believe the season changed while your mind is still catching up. Faith does not require every part of you to move at the same speed. So here is the practical question. Is the danger you are reacting to happening now, or is your mind rehearsing a danger it learned before? Ask that slowly when tension rises. Do not shame the reaction. Just separate what is present from what is remembered. Maybe the person in front of you has not betrayed you. Maybe the opportunity has not disappeared. Maybe the quiet room is simply quiet. Maybe nothing needs fixing in this moment. When you make that distinction, old alarms begin losing authority without losing the wisdom that came from what you survived. This is not passivity, it is discernment with better information. The Hebrew idea, often connected with peace, shalom, points beyond the absence of conflict. It points toward wholeness and right relationship. Peace is not merely a room with no battle. It is an inner life no longer organized around expecting one. Say this with intention. I stop bracing. You are not promising that nothing difficult will happen again. You are deciding that imagined danger will not receive the same authority as present reality. That quieter strength may be exactly what this season requires. And this leads to the next mystery. If you really did survive what shaped you, why does victory still feel incomplete? Why can a person know they changed and still look at life for proof that the test counted? The answer exposes a trap that can keep strong people waiting after the lesson is learned. The second trap begins with a question you may have asked in private. If I passed, where is the proof? You look at the door that still has not opened. Then you wonder whether the test is still happening because the reward has not become visible. Chosen one. That assumption can keep you trapped. You begin measuring spiritual progress only by external change. If the money has not moved, you assume you have not moved. If the relationship has not appeared, you assume God is still withholding something. If the calling is unclear, you start searching for another lesson to complete. This is what I call the empty victory trap. It happens when the outside world becomes the only certificate you will accept. You survived pressure. You changed your choices. You learned boundaries. But because the visible reward has not arrived, you discount the person who emerged. The test can be complete before the evidence catches up. That does not mean every delay is sacred. It does not mean every closed door hides a miracle. It means internal change and external results do not always move at the same speed. Your character can shift before your circumstances reflect it. Maybe you are tired of hearing that your breakthrough is coming. Maybe you do not need another prediction. Good. You do not have to believe something dramatic will happen tomorrow to receive the value of this message. The useful question is simpler. What has already changed in you that you keep refusing to count because it did not arrive with applause? Maybe you stopped chasing people who only wanted access to you. Maybe you finally said no without over-explaining. Maybe you no longer abandon your values just to keep peace. Those changes are not small. They alter what you will tolerate. They alter what you will choose. And while none of that guarantees a specific outcome, it changes the person who will meet whatever comes next. So, ask yourself two questions. What am I still trying to prove? And who would I be today if no new test were required? Do not rush. The first exposes the burden. The second exposes the identity underneath it. Maybe you would rest without guilt. Maybe you would stop choosing the hardest path because difficulty feels more spiritual. Maybe you would stop treating every delay as a verdict on your worth. Maybe you would make one clear decision without waiting for a crisis. This is where victory becomes real in a quieter way. You stop needing suffering to certify growth. You stop asking pain to tell you whether God still sees you. The absence of struggle does not make you less chosen. Stay here for a moment. You do not need to manufacture emotion. Just notice what happens when you imagine that no new trial is required to prove your sincerity. For some people, that thought feels like relief. For others, it feels almost frightening. That fear points toward what comes next. Strong people can become attached to proving because proving gives them a role. Carry more, endure longer, ask for less, survive one more thing, and when that role becomes identity, peace can feel like losing the thing that made you valuable. That is why the next part matters. We are going to look at the hidden addiction to proving yourself, and why a strength that once protected your calling can eventually imprison it. Sometimes the hardest thing after passing the test is accepting that you do not have to keep taking it. Chosen one, there is a strange habit that often appears after a long season of pressure. You start choosing the harder path, even when a gentler one would work. You carry more than you need to carry. You wait longer than you need to wait. Somewhere inside, difficulty begins to feel more trustworthy than ease. You tell yourself that sacrifice proves sincerity. You assume that pain means the path must matter. You become suspicious of anything that arrives without a struggle, because struggle became the language through which you learned to measure your own faithfulness. But pain is not automatic proof of divine approval. This is the proving addiction. It begins when the identity that helped you survive becomes the identity you are afraid to release. You were the one who held everything together. You were the one who kept showing up. You were the one who asked for less while carrying more. That strength was real. It deserves honor. But a strength can become a prison when you believe you must keep using it to remain valuable. Endurance asks one question: what else can I survive? Receiving asks another: what am I finally allowed to accept? Notice what happens in your body when you hear this. You do not have to earn the right to rest. Let your shoulders drop slightly. Notice your jaw. Notice your hands. If tension rises, do not force it away. Simply recognize that part of you may still believe safety has to be purchased through effort. This is where many chosen ones become trapped without realizing it. They do not run from growth. They run toward every burden. They confuse over-functioning with obedience. They say yes before checking what the yes will cost, because being needed can feel safer than being still. But God does not need you exhausted in order for your life to have meaning. You do not become more faithful by choosing pain when wisdom offers peace. You do not become more worthy by making every road harder than it needs to be. Ask yourself one question: what would change if I stopped using suffering as proof that I am serious? Maybe you would ask for help. Maybe you would make the simpler decision. Maybe you would stop explaining your boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding them. Say this quietly: I am ready to receive. Not because you expect life to hand you everything, not because effort no longer matters, but because effort and suffering are not the same thing, and maturity is knowing when one is required and the other is not. There is another piece I want you to hold before we go further. Over the past several decades, researchers have studied what happens when the human mind is operating with greater coordination and clarity. Some of that work points toward a question spiritual people do not always ask. What if part of what you have called spiritual fog has a more practical address? What if the issue is not that you need more faith, more pressure, or another test? What if the receiver itself has been carrying the residue of a season it was never designed to inhabit forever? I will come back to that. For now, hold the question. Because once we understand why insight alone does not always create movement, the next piece will make far more sense. Knowing that you can stop proving yourself creates relief, but relief is not the same as movement. This is where many people reach a false summit. They understand the pattern, they agree with the message, they even feel lighter for a moment, yet the next morning they make the same decisions from the same exhausted state. That does not mean the insight was false. It means insight and capacity are not the same thing. You can understand that survival mode is no longer serving you, and still have a mind trained to scan, anticipate, replay, and hesitate. You can know peace is safe, while your attention keeps returning to threat. Think about decision fatigue. A simple choice can feel unusually heavy. You open a task and drift towards something easier. You sense an idea worth following, then lose the thread before you can act on it. That can feel spiritual when it is happening inside a spiritual life. But not every fog is a spiritual attack. Sometimes sleep is poor, sometimes stress is high, sometimes the body needs medical care or professional support, sometimes a psychological pattern needs patient attention. Wisdom becomes stronger, not weaker, when you refuse to force every human difficulty into a supernatural explanation. And still, there is a deeper question. What happens when a person has spent years using mental energy to survive? Attention gets allocated toward protection. Possibilities are filtered through risk. The mind can become excellent at asking what could go wrong, while becoming slower at asking what could now go right. Imagine a different morning. You wake up and do not immediately scan for trouble. You notice one clear priority. You make one decision without rehearsing 10 disasters around it. You speak to someone you love without reading danger into every pause. That is the kind of receiving we are talking about. It is not passive. It is meeting the day with enough inner space to recognize what is actually there, instead of forcing the present through the filter of what hurt you before. Earlier, I asked you to hold a question about the receiver. I told you there was another side of this that spiritual conversations often leave untouched. We are getting close to it now. I waited because a solution means very little before you understand the shape of the problem it is meant to address. You now understand that shape. You can stop calling every hesitation a lack of faith. You can stop assuming that understanding a pattern automatically gives you the capacity to move beyond it. So here is the missing piece. Why does knowing all of this still not create movement? Why can a person recognize the trap, name the fear, understand the history, and still feel unable to make the next clear move? Because insight and capacity are not the same thing. A mind can receive a true idea while still operating through habits built during pressure. A person can know the door is open while remaining too scattered, tired, or guarded to walk through it with confidence. This is the threshold we have been moving toward. The next season does not simply ask whether you understand what happened. It asks whether the part of you that must recognize, choose, and act has enough clarity to function differently. And that brings us to the receiver gap. It is the point where spiritual understanding must meet practical capacity. Once you see that gap clearly, you stop demanding another sermon from yourself and start asking a better question. What would help the receiver become clearer? The receiver gap is simple to recognize. You know what matters, but your mind cannot hold the signal long enough to move cleanly. You feel the next step, then doubt it. You start with intention, then scatter. You call yourself lazy, inconsistent, or spiritually blocked. That explanation is often too harsh. Clarity is not merely a command you give yourself. It is also a capacity you support. The next season does not require a more heroic version of you. It requires a clearer one. Here is the plain truth. You became skilled at surviving because survival demanded attention. You learned to monitor risk, manage uncertainty, and keep functioning under pressure. Those abilities helped you endure. But the skills that protect you during a storm are not always the skills that help you recognize an open door. What changes now? You move from proving toward discernment. You move from constant scanning toward presence. You move from endurance toward clarity. You stop asking only what might go wrong, and you make room to notice what is actually possible. You are not the person still sitting for the test. You are the person learning how to live after passing it. The version of you that survived deserves honor. It does not have to run the rest of your life. Earlier, I asked you to hold a question about the receiver. This is where I close that loop. Dr. Roger Sperry received the Nobel Prize in 1981 for pioneering split-brain research. That Nobel Prize did not prove the product I am about to describe. The team behind this resource says its approach was developed around the broader idea of supporting coordination across those systems. Before I name it, consider two customer reports presented by the creators. A woman from California described years of feeling mentally foggy and emotionally disconnected. She reported feeling clearer after using their audio regularly. A man from Texas described carrying work and family responsibilities while feeling chronically scattered. According to his account, consistent use helped him feel more focused and decisive. These are individual experiences, not guarantees of what another person will experience. The resource is called the Genius Switch. It is presented by a team led by Dr. Daniel Barone as an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. The instructions are simple. Use headphones, close your eyes, relax, and listen once each day. The creators describe the approach as neural sync technology and whole brain activation. They position it as different from ordinary meditation, audio, and common soundtracks. Their claim is that the sequence is designed to support coordinated activity between the two hemispheres. This is not being presented here as a miracle. It is a tool that may fit beside those things for someone who wants practical support for mental clarity. The Genius Switch is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one who understands that spiritual commitment and practical support do not have to compete. You can trust God and still care for the condition of the mind, making daily decisions. The current offer page lists the regular price at $49. It presents a reduced price of $39 on that page. The purchase also includes 4 digital bonuses according to the current offer. Those bonuses include a guided visualization, a grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and a printable guide covering 5 habits. The page also states that buyers receive lifetime access and a money-back guarantee. Read those terms for yourself before deciding. Prices, bonuses, and guarantee details can change, so the current page should always be treated as the source for the offer you are actually considering. There is also a practical reason not to postpone every decision indefinitely. Delay has a cost when delay comes from confusion rather than discernment. But urgency should not replace judgment. Do not buy because you feel pressured. Consider whether the resource fits what you actually need. The creators say the genuine version is distributed through their official page. The link in the description and pinned comment points to the intended page. If what you have heard resonates, read the details there before making a decision. You are free to look, compare, and decide without turning the decision into another test of your faith. And remember this: a tool does not replace God. A tool does not replace obedience. It does not make decisions for you or guarantee a particular outcome. What it can offer is support, while the deeper work of how you live still belongs to you. That deeper work is where we return now. Receiving is not about owning one resource. It is about meeting your life without automatically returning to the survival state that once protected you. The tool was never meant to become the ending. It was meant to support the part of you that still has to choose, speak, act, and live. Chosen one, clarity matters, because clarity changes what you do with the moment in front of you. But even a clearer mind cannot set a boundary you refuse to set. It cannot obey the conviction you already recognize. That responsibility remains yours, and that is not a burden. It is proof that your life is still being shaped by conscious choices. So let me give you 3 receiving questions. Keep them simple. Use them when fear rises, when an opportunity appears, or when an old pattern asks you to return. The first question is this: is this danger current, or is it remembered? Do not answer from habit. Look at what is actually happening. Is there a threat in front of you, or is your body reacting to something that resembles an old wound? That distinction can change a conversation, a decision, and sometimes an entire day. The second question is this: am I choosing from clarity, or am I proving something? Are you saying yes because it is right, or because saying no makes you feel selfish? Are you carrying the weight because it belongs to you, or because being needed has become part of your identity? The third question is this: what becomes possible if I do not need another test? Sit with that one. Maybe you finally apply for the position. Maybe you stop waiting for one more sign. Maybe you let someone love you without interrogating every good moment. This is what receiving looks like in ordinary life. It is quieter than survival. You recognize real danger, but you do not let remembered pain speak louder than the present. Imagine one day lived from that place. You wake up and choose one clear priority. You have a conversation without preparing 10 defenses in advance. You notice an opportunity and evaluate it carefully, without automatically assuming it will disappear or betray you. That is movement. Not frantic movement, movement with presence. And as presence becomes familiar, the person who survived begins to live beyond the test. If the resource described earlier stirred something in you, the link remains in the description and pinned comment. You can review it for yourself. Let the decision be calm. Let it be informed. Let it remain a choice, not another spiritual examination. And after this point, we leave that resource behind. What remains belongs to the deeper work. Because before this message closes, I want to speak to the part of you that still believes suffering is the price of being chosen. Say this with me: I release the test. I release the need to keep proving that I can survive. I release the habit of treating peace like a warning. I release the belief that rest means I have stopped growing. You are not stepping away from courage. You are stepping away from unnecessary combat. There is a difference. Courage faces what is real. Survival mode keeps fighting what is no longer there. And now we are going to make that difference something you can feel, not just understand. Chosen one, I want you to do something simple now. You do not need to force a feeling. You do not need to imagine anything perfectly. Just let your body become a little quieter. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest. Take one slow breath. Now picture a room. Nothing dramatic, nothing supernatural. Just a quiet room with a table, a chair, a sheet of paper, and a door. You have been sitting in that room for a long time, long enough that the chair feels familiar, long enough that the test feels like part of your identity. Look at the paper in front of you. Notice how many questions you have answered. Notice how many times you kept going when your strength felt thin. You do not need to relive every wound. Now, notice something else. There are no new questions on the page. The space beneath the last answer is empty. No hidden section appears. No voice tells you to prove yourself again. You are simply sitting there, waiting for another demand that has not arrived. Many strong people miss this moment. They keep gripping the pencil because holding it became safety. They keep preparing another answer because preparation once protected them from surprise. But you do not win by answering another question. You win by recognizing there are no questions left on the page. Let that sentence settle. You are not tearing the test apart. You are not cursing the room. You are not pretending the experience meant nothing. You are honoring what it taught you without giving it permanent ownership of your attention. Now, place the pencil down. Slowly. In your mind, hear the small sound it makes against the table. Let that sound become a boundary between what required your endurance and what now requires your presence. Look toward the door. You do not have to run through it. Freedom does not need panic. Stand when you are ready. Feel your feet beneath you. Feel the weight of your body. Notice that you are supported before you take a single step. Place one hand over your chest or lower abdomen. Take another breath. Then say this quietly. I do not need another test to know who I am. Maybe part of you resists that sentence. Maybe you remember the mistakes you made. Maybe you remember the days you doubted, the moments you reacted badly, or the times you almost gave up. Passing was never the same as being perfect. Transformation is not measured by never stumbling. It is measured by what you return to when fear and exhaustion pull you away from yourself. You learned, you adjusted, you kept becoming. So do not make your imperfections evidence that the room must remain locked. That is another form of proving. You are allowed to learn without sentencing yourself to another examination. Now imagine your hand touching the door. Feel the surface. Turn the handle. There is no trumpet outside. No crowd is waiting to applaud. There is simply space. Quiet space. A life beyond the room you are leaving. Step through. Do not look for a guarantee. Look for presence. Look for clarity. Look for the next honest thing that belongs to today. And before we close, I want to speak one final declaration over the part of you that still believes suffering is the price of being chosen. Chosen one, honor the version of you that survived. Do not shame that version. Do not call it broken. That version learned how to carry what felt impossible, and it brought you to this moment. But it does not have to carry you forever. Release the need to prove. Release the expectation of punishment. Release the imaginary battle waiting around every corner. Release the guilt that appears when you rest. Release the identity that only feels valuable when something hurts. You are not betraying your strength by becoming softer. You are teaching your strength a new assignment. The old assignment was survival. The new assignment is presence, discernment, clarity, and the courage to receive what is actually here. Say these words slowly. I am not waiting to become worthy. I am not living as if the test is still happening. I honor the strength that carried me. I receive the clarity required for what comes next. I do not need another wound to prove my faith. I do not need another battle to prove my strength. I am allowed to recognize peace. I am allowed to receive. I am still chosen when I am not suffering. Let that last sentence reach the place afraid to believe it. You are still chosen when you are resting. You are still chosen when your life is quiet. If this is the decision you are making now, write one declaration. I am ready to receive. Let those words mean something specific. You are ready to receive truth without demanding pain beside it. You are ready to receive peace without searching for the hidden threat. And now the question from the beginning can finally close. If the test is over, why did freedom still feel far away? Because survival got you through the test, but survival was never meant to define the conditions of your entire life. Freedom begins when old protection stops choosing for you. Freedom begins when remembered danger loses its vote over present decisions. You stop asking how much more you can endure and start asking what clarity is inviting you to receive. You do not need to erase the past. You only need to stop giving yesterday permanent authority over today. So, carry the wisdom, keep the discernment, keep the boundaries, keep the faith that survived the dark places, but leave the examination room behind. The test was part of your story. It does not get to become your identity. You can walk forward without another proof. You can breathe without preparing for impact. You can receive peace without apologizing for it. And may the next chapter of your life be met by the version of you that is present for it. Amen.